Semen retention is an ancient practice, yet in contemporary discourse it is overwhelmingly framed as a technology of ascendancy. From the forums of nofap to the blogs of biohackers, the stated goals are almost universally alpha male dominance, superhuman testosterone, magnetic attractiveness, and the accumulation of power. It is sold as a shortcut to becoming the CEO, the warrior, the irresistible lover. This essay, however, argues for a countercultural interpretation, that the true and transformative purpose of semen retention is not the cultivation of arrogance, but the deep cultivation of humility. While the ego seeks retention to fuel fantasies of superiority, the spirit endures it to dismantle the ego itself. By examining the psychiatric risks of the practice, the ancient spiritual frameworks that birthed it, and the lived experiences of long-term practitioners, a paradox emerges. Retention does not make one an alpha. Rather, it confronts the retainer with the extreme limits of his own will, revealing that genuine power lies not in domination, but in surrender. At its core, lust is an ego-driven impulse. It whispers, I want, I need, I deserve. It reduces other human beings into objects of gratification. It feeds on fantasy and exaggerates self-importance. It convinces a man that his desires are urgent and must be satisfied immediately. When a man constantly indulges in sexual release without discipline, he subtly trains his mind to obey impulse. Every urge becomes a command. Every sensation becomes a priority. This breeds entitlement. Entitlement breeds ego, and ego erodes humility. Semen retention interrupts this cycle. When the urge arises and a man chooses restraint, he experiences a confrontation with himself. He sees clearly how powerful desire can be. He sees how easily the mind can rationalize weakness. In that moment of tension, he is humbled, not by external defeat, but by internal awareness. He realizes he is not as in control as he thought, and that realization is the beginning of humility. Retention exposes a man to himself. Without the frequent escape of release, emotions intensify, restlessness surfaces, frustration arises, old wounds may come to light. There is no longer a quick dopamine exit. This confrontation is uncomfortable, but humility is born in discomfort. When you can no longer blame distraction or stimulation, you begin to see your patterns clearly. You recognize your weaknesses without denial. You observe your triggers without exaggeration. You accept that you're a work in progress. Retention forces honesty, and honesty strips pride. A man who practices retention seriously cannot maintain illusions about himself for long. He sees how fragile discipline can be. He sees how easily one moment of carelessness can undo weeks of effort. He sees that strength is not automatic. It must be cultivated daily. This daily confrontation softens arrogance. Semen is biologically powerful. It carries the potential for life. Regardless of spiritual interpretation, its physical significance is undeniable. To treat something capable of creating a human being as casual entertainment slowly dulls a man's reverence for his own creative capacity. Retention restores that reverence. When a man guards what is capable of producing life, he begins to treat himself differently. He becomes more intentional. He begins to understand that he is not merely a consumer of pleasure, but a carrier of generative force. And when you become aware that you carry something powerful, humility follows naturally. Why? Because true power reveals responsibility. Power without responsibility becomes arrogance. Power with responsibility becomes humility. Retention teaches that your energy matters. Your choices matter. Your impulses have consequences. This awareness creates a grounded seriousness, not a rigid self-righteousness, but a quiet understanding of gravity. Many men believe they are strong until they attempt retention. The first few days may feel manageable, but as time passes, the intensity of desire grows. The mind negotiates. The body insists. The imagination expands. It is here that humility deepens. You realize that self-mastery is not assumed. It is earned. You understand that strength is not proven by talk, but by consistency. You see that your willpower has limits, and that it must be reinforced by structure, purpose, and awareness. Retention dismantles the illusion of effortless control. It teaches dependence, not on external validation, but on discipline. It teaches that you cannot casually command your instincts without training. This awareness humbles even the proud. A man who has wrestled with himself and seen both victory and failure walks differently. He does not boast. He understands the battle. He knows how thin the line can be. One of the most transformative aspects of retention is the redirection of energy. Sexual energy is creative energy. When not released outwardly, it demands expression elsewhere. It can become productivity, physical training, artistic creation, spiritual devotion, or service to others. Here humility finds fertile soil. When energy is redirected into meaningful contribution rather than self-indulgence, the focus shifts outward. Instead of asking, "What can I take?" the man begins asking, "What can I build? What can I give?" Retention strengthens discipline. Discipline strengthens competence. Competence, when coupled with purpose, naturally seeks contribution. And contribution softens ego. A man who channels his retained energy into improving his family, community, or craft sees the interconnectedness of life. He recognizes that his strength is not for domination, but for upliftment. He learns that the greatest form of power is restraint in service of something greater than himself. This is humility in action. Sexual conquest and attention often become sources of validation for men. The ego thrives on proof of desirability. It seeks affirmation through attraction. It measures worth by reaction. Retention cuts off that easy validation. When a man steps away from chasing attention or gratification, he confronts a deeper question. Who am I without external affirmation? This question is uncomfortable but transformative. Humility grows when identity is no longer tied to how many people desire you. When self-worth is not anchored in conquest or indulgence, it must be built on character. Retention shifts the center of gravity inward. It teaches contentment and self-respect rather than applause. It encourages quiet confidence instead of loud projection. And quiet confidence is inseparable from humility. Lust is impatient. It demands immediacy. It resists delay. Retention trains patience. Patience is not passive. It is active restraint in the presence of desire. It is strength that waits. It is power that chooses timing. A patient man does not rush gratification. He does not demand outcomes. He understands that growth is gradual. He respects process. Humility and patience are intertwined. The arrogant man believes he deserves instant satisfaction. The humble man understands that discipline is a long road. Retention lengthens perspective. It reminds a man that life is not about momentary highs, but sustained integrity. It teaches that some things are worth guarding, and that guarding requires time. One of the often overlooked fruits of retention is a shift in perception. When lust is less dominant, clarity increases. Women are seen less as objects of gratification and more as full human beings, with depth, complexity, and dignity. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share the video. This shift fosters humility. Objectification is rooted in ego. It reduces others to personal benefit. When that lens weakens, empathy strengthens. Respect deepens. Conversations become less transactional and more authentic. Retention quiets the internal noise that distorts perception. In that quiet, humility grows, not only toward oneself, but toward others. No journey of retention is perfect. Most men will stumble at some point. They will break discipline. They will feel disappointment. Here lies one of the greatest opportunities for humility. Failure strips pride. It dismantles self-righteousness. It reminds a man that he is human. If approached correctly, failure does not destroy humility. It refines it. Instead of collapsing into shame or inflating into denial, a humble man learns. He analyzes his triggers. He strengthens his systems. He resumes the path with deeper understanding. Retention, when practiced sincerely, removes the illusion of moral superiority. It becomes less about proving strength to others and more about mastering oneself quietly. The man who has failed and risen understands compassion. He judges less harshly. He boasts less frequently. He walks with measured confidence. There is a temptation in any discipline to broadcast it, to announce streaks, to claim superiority, to wear restraint as a badge. But true retention cultivates internal transformation, not external performance. Humility prefers silence. The man who genuinely practices retention does not need to proclaim it. His focus is inward. His growth is private. His energy speaks through action rather than declaration. He understands that discipline is not for applause. It is for alignment, and alignment is quiet. Many spiritual traditions emphasize restraint, self-control, and reverence for life force. Whether one interprets retention through religious, philosophical, or psychological lenses, its discipline aligns with the principle of mastery over impulse. Humility is central to spiritual maturity. To admit that one's impulses do not define one's identity is to step into higher awareness. To recognize that desire is powerful, yet not absolute, is to grow in wisdom. Retention creates space for reflection. Reflection deepens self-knowledge. Self-knowledge reveals limitation. An awareness of limitation is humility. The practice becomes less about suppression and more about transformation, transforming desire into devotion, impulse into intention, energy into purpose. Ultimately, semen retention cultivates humility by grounding a man in reality. It strips illusions of effortless strength. It confronts ego-driven impulses. It redirects energy toward meaningful creation. It reduces dependency on validation. It fosters patience, respect, and self-awareness. The retained man, if he walks the path sincerely, becomes less reactive and more reflective, less boastful and more composed, less entitled and more grateful. He understands that power is not in domination, but in restraint, not in indulgence, but in intention, not in noise, but in steadiness. Humility is not the absence of strength. It is strength under control. Semen retention, practiced with wisdom and sincerity, becomes more than a sexual discipline. It becomes a character discipline, a mirror, a refining fire. And from that fire emerges not arrogance, not superiority, but a grounded man who knows both his power and his limits. A man who stands tall, yet bows internally. A man whose strength does not shout. A man whose discipline cultivates humility.